This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
As Vancouver readies itself for the cold nights of the upcoming winter, our most vulnerable communities search for warm places to sleep. The downtown east side is home to many people experiencing homelessness, but for youths and teenagers, the streets feel especially cold. Advocates say that for unhoused residents younger than 25, housing resources are lacking. They're overrepresented on the street, with a higher unsheltered rate than any other age group per the 2025 homeless count. The numbers show that for every youth in a shelter, another one goes without. This is a stark statistic. It's more than just a number. It represents people experiencing trauma in their formative years. Scout Marine works for the Covenant House. He sees the impact it has on youth every single day. Marine's job is harm reduction in their low barrier shelter, which means addicts are able to get a clean supply to prevent painful withdrawals in their clean white rooms. He checks on them every 18 minutes with naloxone in hand. He also accepts or turns away applications from young adults seeking shelter. His job takes a toll on him. Regardless of how he feels when he gets home, he reminds himself he's serving his community. I reached out to him to get a better understanding of what he does and what unhoused youth are facing.
Yeah. Okay. So the biggest barrier that we tend to see is age. A lot of shelters are pretty age-specific, whether it be children who are too young to get into specific shelters or aging out of programs and then having to kind of transition into going into adult shelters, which a lot of them tend to not want to do. Which is fair enough. It's a very different vibe for sure. So from that, the age barrier to a lack of proper identification, because everywhere you go is going to require some form of ID, whether it be like a BCID, a services card, a passport, just like anything that's kind of like that. Not everyone has access to those things, especially depending on their age or whatever the circumstances might be, that they just don't have them or the ability to get them. I mentioned before, like, not having access to a birth certificate is a huge issue. Like, you need your birth certificate to get basically any kind of ID. They want to know who you are. And if you don't have access to that, and that's not an easy thing to get for a lot of people, you're kind of like screwed over in the long run when it comes to getting other things that you need. And where ID is such an important thing to have in order to get into these shelters, you're just kind of like, you're out of luck if that's the case. We do have a lot of youth who are from immigrant families or in the process of immigrating themselves, and they don't always have everything. It leads to a whole other subsect of issues for them outside of just shelters, but things like that. It's just kind of government barriers almost in a way, because that's just the way that a lot of these shelters are run. But even the private ones tend to require those too, and those are pretty big things. There's also the barrier of just inaccessibility, whether it be the location. Maybe it is an accessible location, but it's in an area of town that youth don't want to be in, which is also so fair and valid. It could be this youth might be in a relationship and the shelter doesn't accept couples. That's one that I'm recently seeing quite up close and personal, and a pretty big one. There are some shelters that do, but not all of them do. And when you mix that in with all the other things that can make something inaccessible, it just makes it so much harder to find a spot for these people.
So if these kids can't find a spot, where exactly do they go?
The street. They sleep on the street. I don't know, when it comes to like emergency overnight shelters, there are a lot of them in Vancouver. Some of them aren't open yet. Some of them are in the process of opening, but they're hard to get into. I do not know if they have the same barriers when it comes to requirements for IDs. I think they do, because they do tend to still have like age barriers, so I would assume that you still need an ID. So while I'd like to say, oh, they're going to just an overnight like emergency shelter, they're probably not. Usually they end up on the streets. If they are lucky enough to have any kind of friends or family that they can go stay with, sometimes that's an option. Usually that's not the case either, or else these kids would not be in the position that they're in. So it just kind of ends up being the streets. Sadly, they're just on the streets. They're sleeping in alleyways or on sidewalks or just anywhere that might feel somewhat safe, but it's kind of nowhere. So when you're out there like that.
What's it like for you, having to turn someone away from care because they simply don't have the identification or their age just doesn't line up with the shelter that you're in?
It's a miserable feeling. It doesn't feel good. We have like youth who even like they were in our program prior, but they've aged out. And like this was a kind of similar in terms of like now we're sending you on your way. And sometimes these youth can be their own worst enemies because they don't want to leave our programs or where they already feel safe and comfortable. So they will turn to the streets instead of going into adult programs because they just aren't ready for it yet. And that's also a miserable feeling. But like when there's like genuinely nothing you can do, and you just kind of have to like bite the bullet on that one and then go home and cry about it later. But like turning youth away, it's never a good feeling. Usually it comes with like trying to find other resources for them, like maybe other shelters that might be able to take them. But when when the barrier itself is not having the proper identification, there really is nothing you can do except for hope that you can help them find that identification or access it somehow. I'm trying to think of the proper term for it, like an ID clinic, I think would be it. Is usually those are things that exist where you can go and they will help you like gain access to your birth certificate and like all of that other stuff. But sometimes that's not an option for everyone for whatever reason. I don't know. I've never had to use one. I've always been lucky enough to just kind of be able to get what I need. When my parents sent me on my way, they sent me with a birth certificate, so I carry that in my wallet, which is kind of stupid, but just like I was lucky in that regard. Not everyone is that lucky. So when you have to turn them away and like they don't always understand why they're being turned away, and you can't always give a very solid explanation because there is nothing beyond just like you need to have ID and you don't have ID. And that seems like a small thing, but yeah.
Have you heard any stories or seen firsthand, you've turned someone away and then later you've seen them on the street struggling?
Sort of not turned away for like a lack of identification, rather just like seeing youth who have had issues in the program, and it's been a mixture of like turned away or they made a conscious decision to leave as well. Like, for example, if people break really intense rules that we have in our program, we do tend to put people on, like, breaks. So it could be, like, a one-day break from the program in which you either have to, like, go stay at another shelter for the night or just, like, figure something out. And usually when that's the case, if it's a prolonged break, they might go try and get into another shelter. If it's a short break, they will likely just sleep on the street. And I have seen that where it's, like, they're on their way out with whatever they can carry and a hot meal. And then, like, I can, like, walk past them on my way to the bus stop, like, 5 hours later. And it's like, there's nothing you can do, really. There's pretty strict rules about, like, interacting with people from your shelter, like, when it comes to, like, out in the community. And even if there was anything you could do, it's like they don't want to talk to you. Like, they're upset. So, like, fair enough. They don't want you in their business, and that's, like, completely understandable. But it's not good. Like, it never feels good. If I had it my way, it wouldn't be like that. There would be no turning people away. But that's just kind of not the realistic approach, I think, when it comes to how these things are run, unfortunately.
What can be done? How can we improve the situation?
I think that there needs to be lower barriers, or like access to IDs needs to be like easier. It's even like, as somebody who has all of my necessary information, like when I moved to Vancouver, getting my BCID was a pain in the ass. And I have everything I need, but they need you to have some kind of address. They need you to have a place that they can like mail things to. You have to book an appointment. You can't just do walk-ins. Like, it's not overnight. It takes a long time to get your ID. And that in itself is already, like, even to youth who can go and get one, a huge barrier. Like, that's a lot of work that needs to be done for people who aren't always in the right headspace to get that work done. So things like that need to be a lot easier. I think that they should make it more like advocate accessible versus needing to have the person do everything themselves, because not everyone has like the mental capacity to do all of that themselves. But so much of it is required that that's the case. Like, I think while in a perfect world everyone would have access to the information they need, that's not the case. But also in a perfect world, like, the government itself, the province that we live in, would make it easier for people to access what they need, because it's not like they aren't aware that these are the rules in place for the shelters that they fund. Like, they have to know that that's what's going on. And if they say that they want to help fix this problem and get people off the streets, then they need to do their part to fix that problem. Making things more accessible that people need to access shelters would be one of those things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any final emotions you want to touch on that come through this process? Like, when you see a kid out in the street, someone who you've just had to send on their way, what does that do for you emotionally?
Nothing good, really. It never feels good. Yeah, it's always pretty miserable. And having to tell people to leave is also miserable. It's one of those things that just kind of like lives with you, because you don't know if you're going to see them again in a few days, when you're going to see them again. If the next time you hear about them, it's going to be like the VPD showing up, checking in as a missing persons report, or to tell you that they like found their body somewhere. So like it feels like a lot of bad blood to have on your hands when you don't know what the outcome's going to be. So it never feels good. So like the only thing I can hope is that in situations where that arises, that there are better resources out there to point them towards. And sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. Yeah, and like to anyone who's ever, I don't know, there's a lot of people who work in this field out here in this city, is like, I say this because it's something that's constantly told to me from my friends who also work in this field, just to like, don't beat yourself up about it because you've done all you can do. But that's so much easier said than done, because like there is no point in which you don't beat yourself up about this. Yeah, I don't know. It's never easy. It's never good. It's never a good feeling. It never gets easier.
Despite the hurt he goes through, watching people coping with horrible circumstances, Maureen knows he's saving lives. This was our interview show for The Record. I'm Aiden Singh, and you're listening to BCIT's The Crow.
Today on For the Record, we continue our look at what work really looks like for Gen Z in British Columbia. Yesterday, we heard from a software graduate building startups on his own terms. This time, we're hearing something different. Not a trend, but a personal story that says something about the pressures young workers are carrying. Ian Chadwick trained as a full-time mechanic and spent years in the trade before hitting a wall. He says he doesn't know anyone else leaving the industry like he did, but after months of stress and burnout, he walked away and took a quieter job at a local fish store. It's a decision that raises a larger question. What does it mean when a job that's in demand no longer feels sustainable to the people doing it? Ian joined me to talk about burnout, identity, and how Gen Z is trying to find stability in a workforce that doesn't always make it easy. Here's our conversation. Ian, how are you today?
Honestly, Quinlan, I'm doing real good. Thank you. Thank you for asking, and thank you for having me, man.
No, of course. I'm very glad that you could take the time to do this with me. I really appreciate it. So, before we get into the career shift itself, can you, I guess, walk me through how you first, decided that you wanted to work with fish? How you, I guess, fell in love with this? Like, how did you, when did this go from something that, you would consider a hobby into something that you actually wanted to do for a living?
Oh man, that's a good question. Honestly, there was never any like hard like switch or any like defined event. I just got really into like, keeping fish, making up like, aquascaping, learning about fish, watching fish, caring for fish, everything like that. And then I wasn't like overjoyed with you know, my current occupation at the time. And I thought, man, like what else am I gonna do besides what I'm doing? And I was like, maybe I could like maybe I could work at this fish store that I love going to. And yeah, by some stroke of luck or whatever it may have been, I went in, I talked to the guy and they said, "Yeah, we can take you." And that's basically how it went down.
Oh, that's no, that's really interesting. But was there anything, I guess, in particular about, fish that made you go, "Huh, this is it." Why not like a flower store? Why not a grocery store?
Honestly, I mean like to each their own, but I just find fish a lot more interesting. And inherently in finding something interesting, doing it as a job, it's not that it's a lot less of a job, if you know what I mean.
I do know what you
Um,
mean. Yeah.
yeah, it's just
No.
like something that comes a bit more naturally rather than trying to like, you know, force myself into something that some other job would want me to do or really forcing myself to learn something that I would need to know for a job. Um, yeah, it just comes a lot easier if you're interested in what it might be, right?
No, absolutely. And that's, I guess, something that I kind of live by where, if you turn a passion into like into work, then it's no longer work.
Yeah, yeah.
I know what you're saying.
And obviously a job is a job at the end of the day. You're always gonna it is a job, but it's something that I look forward to 9 times out of 10. It's like, all right, it's time to go to the fish store and, work with the fish, work with the store and everything like that. And it's not that big a deal.
No, absolutely. And I guess to jump off of that point that you just made about, you enjoy coming to work. So you were working as a mechanic, it's a steady job, it's a reliable trade. What was the moment when you realized I can't do this anymore? I need to do something different.
Honestly, it was probably a collection of things. I do have to say though, number 1 would have had to have been I guess my top 2, pardon me, would be like stress and burnout, man. Um, it just kind of got to a point where it was like every day was a bit of a drag. And I was like, man, so much can go wrong. So much is riding on me in my workplace. And you just get tired of it, like day after day of just like stress and worry. It just kind of like wore me down to the point where I thought, I don't I don't hate working on cars. I love working on cars still, but I felt myself losing that. I felt myself like not wanting to work on my own cars,
Yeah.
starting to neglect my own cars just because like I'm not going to, I work on cars for, 40 or 50 hours a week, Monday to Friday. What am I doing on Saturday? Well, I tell you what I'm not doing, working on my car for free.
No, absolutely. And it's definitely I guess one of those things where you love something very much and you enjoy doing it. But like you mentioned, you get to a point where when it becomes a demand, when it becomes an expectation, there's a certain, I don't know, feeling that almost takes over of, I don't really wanna do this anymore. Not because, you don't enjoy it, but because it's like, "Oh, now there's pressure. Now there's other people relying on me to make sure that their vehicle doesn't blow up," and I can totally imagine how after a while, after, you deal with so many clients, that stress can add up.
It does. And it's not like there was like particular events or anything like that. It's just, over the years, it all starts to build up and I kind of feel like I need to like take a step back and kind of refigure out like kind of like reset my my like stress levels and like the things that I got like moving around in my brain. It was like, okay, let's back off at this angle and do something like, yeah, super different, but something that I'm still passionate about, something that I can continue learning.
No,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, I guess, leaving a trade job like like being a mechanic like you were for something completely different, it takes guts. What to you was the scariest part of that decision, and what was the part that made it feel worth the risk?
Probably the scariest part was handing in my notice at the shop that I'd worked at. Because I knew that you know, I wouldn't say I exactly thrived in, a situation like high school. And I don't really have that much as far as like a post-secondary education. So it was definitely scary in the sense that I felt like I was jumping like off into the unknown. Like it's a fish store, so there's a lot of like, fish care and things that go along with the fish. But at the end of the day, it's a retail store. It's to an extent, it's a retail job. And I had never been in a situation where I would be like working with the public, like representing like a store. And that was scary. I'm not gonna lie to you, that was scary.
No, I can
um,
totally imagine, and especially when, you're working with cars on a daily basis, you don't necessarily have to interact with people. You're just working, hands on the machine itself. So to have to, I guess, learn a whole new like skill of being of being, having interpersonal skills can be a lot.
yeah.
But do you enjoy it now? How do you feel about that?
I do enjoy it, and, it definitely was a learning curve. Obviously, like, learning about the fish on, like, a more professional level, but also learning how to, like, interact with the public in, like, a super friendly and open and, like, welcoming way was something that I had never done up until now. Um, and I feel like that was also a very good thing for me to have to, kinda, like, put myself through. Because up until this point in my life, I've never really interacted with the public, and I feel like this was a really good opportunity for me to put myself out there and, kinda, like, hone my, I guess, like, my skills as far as, like, working with the public,
Yeah.
if you kinda know what I mean?
Your
Yeah.
interpersonal skills. Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah.
And, you're learning a whole new skill set as well, like, in this career change, like, up to this point. And, those
Yeah.
are skills that if you decide that you wanna do something else, now you have an entire, new way of dealing with people, and, you can use those skills that you've acquired, into something new. So it's kinda wonderful.
Exactly, man, and that's actually been something that I've, like, not, like, diehard lived by, but I like to be able to do things myself. That's part of the reason I got into automotive to begin with, because I had some experience in, like some basic steel fabrication and welding, as well as carpentry, like basic carpentry and stuff like that. But automotive was the one thing that I didn't know, so I went into that. And now that I know quite a lot about that, I kind of felt like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing that I should like hone in on as a person to kind of, round out my skill set. Um, and working with something like a live fish, um, in like a retail environment, that kind of like ticked all my boxes for something that would make me feel good to learn and experience, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. And it's always good to just become a more well-rounded person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Like you said, if I do ever find myself in a situation where, I'm looking for work, I know that I can always be a mechanic, man.
oh, dude, of course, you have that skill set too. A jack
Yeah.
of all trades, if you will. So, my final question to you is, I guess, when you look at people our age navigating the workforce, dealing with burnout, pressure, instability, do you feel like your shift is part of something bigger, maybe? Or was this just, maybe just a personal choice to chase what makes you happy?
Well, that's a really good one. I have to say, based off of my experience, not very many mechanics that I know, who am I kidding? No mechanics I know have done what I have done. Um, and I do have to say, I see it more with um uh people like my coworkers now. I see the instability, especially, changing markets, tariffs, AI, all that stuff. I feel like it's affecting my coworkers here a lot more than it is affecting my previous coworkers, who I still keep in touch with, right? I feel like the trades is a lot more, for the most part, a lot more sheltered than, say, a retail job where half your day, let's say, you respond to emails. Like that's like a job market that's changing. People who work that job, are worried. Um, but I do feel like for the most part, like the trades, especially automotive, I feel like most mechanics aren't super worried about stuff like that. About stuff like, maybe like, injuries and pay. I could see that being a bigger deal. But for right now, I don't think it's kind of gotten to the point for most mechanics that I know to worry about stuff like that.
No, absolutely. I totally understand. It's a very stable job. It's a stable environment, and we talked about previously how you don't necessarily have to deal with a whole bunch of people, on a day-to-day
Exactly.
basis. So it's
Yeah.
kind of nice in that sense, and maybe the burnout isn't necessarily as high having to, deal with people on a day-to-day basis, but I'm sure that there's definitely it definitely has its own caveats as well. But we'll save that topic for another time. Ian, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak with me. It really means a lot, and your perspective has added so much to our show.
Of course, Colin, anytime.
All right, I'll talk to you soon, man. I appreciate it.
You too. Thank you.
All right,
Bye bye.
that was Ian Chadwick, a former mechanic who left the trade after experiencing significant burnout. His story isn't about representing every young worker, but it does add another layer to the conversations we've been hearing throughout this series. Gen Z isn't just chasing opportunity, they're chasing work that doesn't cost them their health. For BCIT's For the Record, I'm Quinlan Curry.